What does this mean for the oil market balance, and what does it mean for OPEC?
I think there's nothing new as such, right? We were expecting these sanctions to kick in as of last night, and of course everybody's looking forward kind of to the 4th of November ones to see. That's the real tightening, right, of the, because that's when the oil sanctions kick in, and everybody is looking to see whether there will be waivers granted by the US administration. The US administration has been very clear in saying they want as many countries as possible to go down to zero in terms of imports from Iran. Now, there is a lot of concern in the market that maybe China will import more oil than usual to offset the declines from other countries. But even recently, China has come out and said that while they are not planning on cutting back imports, they are not going to raise imports either. So we are expecting a drop of about 1.5 million barrels per day of Iranian exports from 2.7 million barrels per day to say around 1.2 by the end of the year. But the dollar sanctions that came into force as of last night are extremely important because most of these payments, not all the payments, are done in dollars. And even the ones that are done in euros, those banks are no longer willing to transact with Iran because of the secondary sanctions. I think the secondary sanctions are far, far more important for the oil market than even the direct sanctions are, because of it's very hard to ascertain how many individual companies, private companies, and even banks are just being cautious and saying we are not going to deal with Iran.
Okay, but Amrita, so what does an economically weak Iran actually mean for the region, right? I guess that President Trump and the Trump administration is betting on a weak Iran economically, which means that they lose their clout in the region, which also means that it has implications on the war in Syria and all sorts of stuff. Perversely, could it actually give it, more of a clout because it's their fight against the big ugly Americans?
No, absolutely, and our view very strongly is that we don't think Iran's going to come to the table. Iran has gone through a lot worse in the past, and like you just ran Rouhani's speech, I think again, everybody's saying they're willing to negotiate, but they want the other person to actually concede first. I think that's a huge challenge. Yes, inflation is rising, but they have had worse before. And I think the critical thing which people forget today versus even 2014, 15, 16, oil prices are a lot higher today. So their overall revenues coming in, even with lower exports right now, are higher. So they do have some buffer. Of course, as oil exports continue to decline into year end, that hardship will increase, but Iran is very, very tough. I don't think they're going to come to the table that easily, and I do expect to see even more skirmishes in the region, much like you've seen more Houthi missile attacks around the Red Sea, but just generally much more unrest in Yemen and Syria as well.
Amrita, what would it take for Iran to actually try and close the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, again, this would be alienating China, which they don't want to do at this point.
No, I mean, we really don't think Iran will go down that route, because that would be such a direct escalation. And I think they would be very, very cautious of doing that, because then, given the red lines that Israel have drawn and even potentially the US. But that's why I do think you're going to see indirect issues via Syria, via Yemen, but rather than them closing the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, of course, they could just put a few mines, and then that's very dangerous. But we genuinely don't think that's the route Iran wants to go down. I think they'll talk about it, there'll be military exercises, but we don't foresee a closure of the Straits of Hormuz.